either that, oh, this isn't like our usual meeting, like we usually just meet over WebEx. And so
Okay.
they may actually be struggling with logging in right now. So
Yeah.
that's my theory anyway.
Should we ping them?
Yeah, that might be a good idea. I can ping them. I actually have a Slack that they're on that I can ping them on.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Ooh, Esco isn't on it actually. Weird. I mean, I assumed that Esco would be sort of activated because he was working on this stuff this morning. It's kind of late for him though. He's in Europe.
Yeah, 7 p.m. Right. So this will be an evening meeting for him.
Yeah.
It was available on his time, so I chose the time that people everyone said was green. So
yeah, Esco's used to this because he's dealing with us idiots in the United States and our crazy, late hours for all of the thread meetings as well.
Yeah.
It's going to be a really quiet meeting if they don't come. Oh, there's Esco. Yay.
Hi, hello there. Just wanted to check.
Hello, Esco.
Yes.
We can hear you.
So I pinged Jonathan on Slack and I have not gotten a response from him yet.
Okay. So I wanted to flash this slide for formal and official purposes. And now we can pass the ball to you. You can share the GitHub document and we can start look. We will wait for Jonathan, but at least we can start looking at some of the issues now.
Okay. By you, do you mean me or Darren?
You.
You, Ted, I think. Yeah.
All right.
If
Let's see if this works.
Yeah.
Where is
the stop
share button? Okay, here we go.
So, and that's a good question. So we'll take a look at GitHub. We'll share it. You're in the car on your laptop. I'm probably one of the things that we'll talk about once we go through the agenda is how we'll organize the editing in real time, just to verify that. So.
Yeah. Oh. Right. So I think I'm on. So I requested screen sharing. Did you guys enable that?
Ed, yeah. Let me just see. There's something I can click here.
Oh yeah, I got it.
Got it.
All right. So this should work. Let's just see. So right now you would be seeing my. Yeah. Okay.
Coming through. Yeah.
Yeah. That's working for some value of working, but no, that's not it. Sorry. Definitely don't want that window. Here we go. Okay, so this is the SNAC issue tracker list. So sorry, the only problem with doing it this way is actually I can't see who's on. So I guess I'm just going to leave it here for a minute. This is sort of fun anyway. Well, actually, no. So we're waiting for Jonathan, but you said we wanted to
We
start.
are.
So let's just start. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have to confess that I have not had any time to work on this since we last talked. It has been absolutely insane. So I've been watching Esco and Jonathan do edits, or do work, comments, and so forth. So to some extent, I think it would be helpful. So let's see. I'm just looking at what the timing. So Esco commented on the state machine thing, or no, that was me actually. Weird. Oh, that was in 2023. Sorry. Yeah. So I'm just looking to see. These are all 2023.
Can I
Yeah.
disrupt you for a second and ask
Absolutely,
you?
yes.
So in one of the main agenda we had in last meeting, we came up with certain action items,
Mhm.
and I wanted to see that how many updates have we made. I know you said that you have got no time to work. You got no time to work on the document at all. So can
Yeah.
we assume from last meeting to now, document have minimal changes because Jonathan did take care of a couple of issues.
Mhm. So Jonathan and Esco have been doing some work on the issue tracker recently, and it might be better if they gave a status update, because I haven't been able to follow closely what they've been doing. I just came off the end of a really intense development cycle, so I actually do have cycles to work on this before the upcoming IETF. So it's not like we'll get an incremental update that I'm involved with before IETF, but yeah, the status right now is basically in Esco's and Jonathan's heads.
Okay.
I'm happy to provide a quick update.
Great.
Yeah, so basically I took the meeting notes that we had from our last meeting, and took the easy pickings out, right? So we had 3 issues where we actually had proposed text that Ted had been wrote during the meeting, and I literally just copied that text into a pull request, so that people could review it. And Esco did that this morning. So thank you, Esco, for helping to review that. But yeah, I think there's a number of other issues that we discussed, that we don't have proposed text for yet. But I think we have a good idea of what to write. It just needs to get initial text just needs to get written.
Okay. So I mean, we have these 2 hours before us. Should we just dig into that, or I'll defer to Darren and Karen if there's anything else you'd like to accomplish first.
That was definitely a primary goal, was
Right.
to get some text written against the issues and form PRs, and get them submitted and see where the discussion goes from there.
Okay. So
Kieran, was there anything? So I'm just going to double check with Kieran if there was anything else we wanted to touch on before we jump into that.
Yeah, that's right. I wanted to just baseline where we start this meeting from, and towards the end, how much we have accomplished. So just wanted to baseline. Let's start.
Okay, so it sounds like where we are right now is that we have pull requests but no actual changes in the repo. Is that right, Jonathan?
Yeah, these 3 are not merged.
Okay, so let's just first of all go over these 3, because that way we can presumably clear them for merge. So I participated a little bit in this discussion this morning. So the first one is allows autonomous configuration. Okay, so this was just fixing the reference to Slack. Is that right?
Yeah, I think
Esco?
so. I'll let Esco talk.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so which issue did you pick out of the
Oh,
3?
so can you see the shared screen, or is my screen share working?
Yeah, it's working, but it's
Too small?
I'm having a bit of a monitor problem, so it looks very
Oh,
small on my
sorry.
monitor.
So if you go to the pull requests on GitHub, And
Yeah.
the issue name is, the update is 511 usable on-link prefixes. It's issue number
yeah.
41.
Okay, then I'll open that one. Yeah, I made the screen a bit larger now as well. So
Okay.
Make
yeah.
make your window smaller, not bigger.
For sure.
Well,
So
There you go.
that for now.
Yeah.
Does that help? All right. So now you can't see anything, but here we go. So this is the first one. So I guess Jonathan, you. I'm not actually. I don't normally review things on GitHub, so I'm somewhat parsing this output. Jonathan, I assume that the thing that my cursor is on is a change you made.
Right. It's the change,
Okay.
the proposed change. Yep.
Yeah, and then this Esco's review comment is basically just saying Slack,
Yeah.
as opposed
This
to
is
autonomous
a
configuration.
proposed update to the change. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, let's see. My only issue with this change is it made it quite a bit wordier, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Is
Yeah, I
this
think
the
it's
right
needed
way?
here.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's needed here because we have two things. So the one is the function, which is called Slack in short, or officially stateless address auto configuration, and there's a flag with a different name that indicates whether Slack is actually possible for the prefix, and that's called the autonomous flag. So I think you need both pieces of information here to be complete.
Right. So, sorry, the challenge I have is I can't see the actual text that we're reviewing. That is to say,
Oh,
the
if
text
you
that this
go
change
to,
applies to.
Ted, if you scroll up a ways
Yeah.
and you click on Files Changed.
Oh, files changed. Okay, right. Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Here we All right, perfect.
And then you
All
roll
right.
down, and then you can expand up and below, and you can
All
see
right.
the associated text. And you'll see the comment in line as well if you scroll down a ways.
Great,
Right
perfect.
there.
Okay, so let's just start from the top then. So proposed change here is instead of usable, suitable, which is what we discussed, so that's great. Max suitable reachable time, usable, suitable. By the way, I'm saying yes to these things, but if anybody objects, please interrupt me. So suitable on-link prefix, these are all just changes to that. Now this is the first substantive change. Stub routers must evaluate prefixes that are advertised on link as to their, oh, I see. So as to their suitability for use in communicating. If no suitable, okay, an on-link prefix. Okay, so I see we just made this more, we divided this out a bit. Suitable, an on-link prefix is considered suitable as advertised on the link in the RA and has a preferred lifetime, 30 minutes or more, is marked on link, has a width of 64 bits, and allows autonomous configuration. Okay. So I think Esco, I think so we're talking now, I think the distinction here is that there's actually two places that we have to look, right? One is in the router advertisement itself. We have to make sure that, well, actually, no. The router advertisement itself, it contains a prefix option. It can indicate that DHCP is available, but it can't indicate that you do anything but DHCP. The only thing that does that is the autonomous configuration bit. So, so I think I'm wondering, Eska, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the problem here is so the preferred lifetime is part of the prefix information option. The on-link bit is part of the prefix information option. The width is part of the prefix information option. And the autonomous configuration bit is part of the prefix information option. So actually, I think that your edit applies to this whole thing as opposed to just the last bullet item. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure it does. Yeah.
Okay, so so it might make sense to say something like in the so instead of, well, I don't know, is there a way to, can I, yeah, oof, that's not really what I wanted.
So you can reply to his comment, Descos, and you can
Right. Okay, so that's sort of what I'm doing. So it might make sense to say, to
and you
put,
can Press a little plus minus there. Okay.
Oh, well, so it's not, I guess the question is whether we're actually going to edit the document or whether I'm just going to comment on this. But let me just make the comment for now, and we can then decide what to do next. So it might make sense to put the clarification about the RIO in the heading rather than in, oops, sorry, the PIO. Okay, so does that make sense? Everything we have to check is in the PIO?
That makes sense to me.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to just add that comment for now. All right, and then next, so suitable, changed usable to suitable. And then this looks a little bit more involved. Use teach text. Oh no, I guess it's not actually more involved. Oh, I see. It's just because the line break changed. Okay. And then there's another line break change. Suitable, usable, suitable, usable, suitable. Yeah. Okay, I'm scanning through these very quickly. So if I'm going too fast for anybody, please stop me. I'm just not seeing anything other than suitable, usable changes so far.
I think the rest of this is just the word replace.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So I think that's good. Can we approve this with those caveats?
Yeah, when I was going through the state machine, I had a question on deprecating state. So one of the conditions when we can transition to deprecation state is when we are moving from ULA to non-ULA. That's one of the bullet point given there. So it was clear to me at that time, yeah, we will start deprecating ULA, but will we still, is Stub Network is still reachable and by which prefix or by both the prefixes for the
Yeah.
deprecation time?
Right. So that's a really good question, and it's something that came up when we were discussing this in the context of thread. Apton has been, I think, discussing this in the thread context, and so there's a couple of issues here. One is the transition from DHCP from ULA to DHCP or vice versa, and so in that situation. It makes sense if a prefix is being advertised on the stub network, it makes sense to advertise a route to it because otherwise it's actually harmful to advertise it on the stub network, right? Because it's possible that it might get used, and then a packet comes out of the stub network and there's no way to send it back, and so that packet just wanders off into the weeds somewhere. So yeah, we have to advertise a route to it as long as it's being advertised as an on-link prefix. So sorry, I didn't see where that was in the
It was in the deprecating state.
here.
Search for ULA or something, it's further down.
State hyphen deprecating.
Okay, let me see. And while we are searching for it, another question is from deprecating state to suitable state.
Sorry, Kieran, you're breaking up. But I think Ted has the right section now, right? 388.
Yeah. So Okay, so we're not actually seeing all of the text. The preferred, okay, the usability.
Yeah, you can expand any of those blocks, Ted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Eric here, and just speaking as an individual guy, and sorry for joining late, this usable, suitable, isn't it like may and a should in BCP 14?
So I don't know if you remember the conversation that happened. Were you at the last?
Eric was
at
involved. Yeah,
Eric
he was there.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, the discussion that we had was basically some people were offended by the idea of usable because a DHCP prefix is usable. It's just not suitable. So we decided on the term suitable because it didn't offend anybody, basically. But it's intended to mean the exact same thing.
Okay. As a non-English speaker, right? So it's those two names
Totally.
are vaguely related to me. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Subrouter. So I'm kind of like glazing over here. Where does it say about advertising the route?
You may want to search for adv, not advertising.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, there's a lot of references to that same thing. So I'm looking for the same, Ted.
Yeah, hang on a sec. Let me just
Ik houd van je Nederlands gebruikersinterface. Hè? Het is indrukwekkend.
indrukwekkend.
Impressive, if I'm not mistaken,
Impressive.
right? So
Yeah. I had actually heard indrukwekkend before. That's a good one. So
you know, druk means pressure, right? So
right, indruk, or
full of
in
pressure,
under,
basically.
under the indruk, yeah. I've heard indruk, just not indruk. Did you say indrukwekkend?
Wekkend.
Wekkend.
Indrukwekkend.
So waking pressure?
Yeah. Thank you, Esco, for correcting me, right? So I speak Dutch only 2 weeks or 1 week a year. So
Yeah, that's
I could hear it.
so rats, this is challenging.
Sorry, I got kind of lost in all this searching. So what are we looking for?
So we're trying to figure out, oops, no, not that. We're trying to figure out, so show me the table of contents. That's what I wanted. Okay, here we go. So we're looking at, the question is when we're advertising an on-link prefix. So we're in the usable on-link prefixes section, and we're in the state machine part. So in the state machine, when we're in, so this is a little bit, actually, it's a little bit awkward now because really each route is in a state, and we might have two if we're doing DHCP. So if we, or we can say that you know, if we have a DHCP prefix left over or a ULA prefix left over, then we have to keep advertising it. But where does it say that we're, so there's two router advertisements, right? There's a router advertisement that's on the link where we're advertising the prefix, and then there's a router advertisement that's on the other link. And the challenge we have is advertising a route to, so this would be reachability. So, sorry, back to the table of contents. Managing addressability, managing reachability on the adjacent infrastructure link. Subrouters must advertise reachability to the stub router OSNR prefixes on any AIL. If the stub router is advertising a usable prefix on any interface, such prefixes must be advertised on that interface. Wait, what? If the stub router is advertising a usable prefix, any such prefixes must be advertised on that interface in the same beacon that is, okay, yeah. Each stub network will have some set of prefixes that are advertised as on-link for that network. A stub router connected to the network should advertise reachability to all such prefixes. So I think, Kieran, that this text actually covers what you were asking, right?
Kieran might be gone. I think
Oh.
she is. That we had a network
I'm
drop.
sorry.
You back again?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this text, I think, addresses your question, but we might want to make it clearer.
It's felt that deprecating state is a little bit underspecified. In the sense, when you read the term deprecation, it means we are withdrawing the prefixes. But what else does it mean that I'm not reachable during that period of time, or after? How do I transition out of deprecating state?
Right.
In the sense, can I directly jump to usable state, or do I always have to go through begin advertising state? Because current text says that you can only transition to begin advertising state. You cannot directly get into usable. And I think there is a scenario where you can get into usable directly. And that is only
Okay.
possible when you are still reachable with the new prefix.
Okay, right. So sorry, I'm getting a little bit oriented here. So
I think she's getting to section 5125. Yeah.
right. 5125. Stub router deprecating its on-link prefix. Okay, so the first thing to say here is that this subject line is a little bit imprecise because it's not saying whether this is the on-link prefix on infrastructure or the on-link prefix on the stub network. So clearly it means on infrastructure. I guess it's sort of okay because we're talking about, this is in section 5.1.2, which is maintaining a usable on-link prefix on the infrastructure link. So, okay, so that's all right. So deprecating its, I mean, I would be inclined actually to adjust this to say deprecating its on-link prefix on the adjacent infrastructure link, but that's maybe too much. Now, so for this case, we're actually never going to have a DHCP prefix for the AIL, right? That can't happen. So the only thing that can happen is either we're advertising an on-link prefix or we're not. And the on-link prefix that we're advertising could be in the process of being deprecated, which is state deprecating, or it could be it could be not deprecated. It could just be publishing. So, and Karen, your question was about advertising a route to that prefix. Is that correct?
Yeah, route to that prefix or advertising, how do we handle that prefix? In the sense, I think it's not visible here, but somewhere we were talking about that one reason we will get into state deprecating is when, if we are using a ULA address and we are given a non-ULA prefix. So, when
Okay,
that
so
thing happens.
all right, so let's see if we can identify the text that you're talking about. So basically the deal with, so remember, we're talking about the adjacent infrastructure link, right? So so in the case of the adjacent infrastructure link, there's basically two ways that we can have a usable prefix. One is that the infrastructure advertises it, and the other is that we advertise it. We being some stub router. If there's more than one stub router, there might be any of the stub routers might advertise it. Okay. So if we're a stub router advertising an on-link prefix because we didn't see a usable on-link prefix, then it's possible that the infrastructure will start advertising a usable on-link prefix. And when that happens, we need to deprecate our prefix. But in terms of this section is about addressability, not reachability. So managing addressability. So if we're talking about reachability, that's a separate section. Now, in terms of what we advertise, so when we could be in the state unknown, which is we don't know if there's a usable prefix yet, so we're waiting to find out. And we wait a certain amount of time, and then when that time is expired, then we wait a certain amount of time, and one of two things will happen. Either we'll see something or we won't. If we see something, then we go into state usable. Now, and then we check to make sure that the router remains present. And then there's also a state begin advertising, which we could get here either because the usable prefix becomes unusable or because there just wasn't one to begin with, right? So then we begin advertising. And so then we get into state advertising usable, which is where we're actually doing the advertising. And then at some point we may see a usable on-link prefix provided by infrastructure, at which point we deprecate our prefix. So this is the situation that we've gotten to. That's the one you're talking about, right?
Yeah, the second bullet here, the page you're showing right now, on the second, the prefix to subrouter is advertising. So this is I think this is a unique case where both prefixes are usable, but you still have to deprecate one because the other one is better or whatever the protocol says.
So you're breaking up again, so it's a little difficult to follow you.
Yeah, I'm sorry about, I think something wrong with my network connection. So in the second, right now you were explaining that if we don't have a usable prefix, we have to go into state advertising usable state and start advertising our own prefix. But the second bullet is a different case. We had a usable prefix, now we got something else which is also usable. So we have to, but because of the priority, we have to deprecate ULA case and start using non-ULA prefix. And
okay, but that, so the second thing that you just said there, I don't know what that means.
Okay, so what okay, I don't know much about the naval
Let me
history.
clarify. So what you're saying is that a usable prefix shows up, and so we deprecate our prefix and start using the other prefix. But actually,
Yes.
from the perspective of the stub router, the only sense in which we're using any prefix is that some device on the network is using that prefix. And so the challenge for us is just to maintain routing, right? So we either are or are not advertising a usable prefix. If there is a usable prefix being advertised by infrastructure, that has nothing to do with us. We're not doing that. We didn't get a prefix that we need to advertise. A prefix appeared. So the appearance of that prefix is what caused us to go into the deprecating state. So we don't have to do anything about the other prefix except deprecate the one we were advertising, because in principle it's no longer needed. So I think the question that is interesting about this is, what do we do about the routing to, so we were advertising a ULA prefix on infrastructure, right? And now there's also this other prefix on infrastructure. And so presumably we want to advertise a route to the new prefix, the infrastructure provided prefix. But we also still need the prefix that we're deprecating to be reachable. So
Yes.
So I think the point that you're getting at has to do with reachability, not, so it's kind of orthogonal to this section. So then there's another section which is about managing reachability. Okay, so managing reachability on the stub network. The stub router may advertise itself as default router if it has a default route on the AIL. This may not be desirable, but whatever. If it's not advertising itself as default router, it must advertise reachability to any prefixes that are being advertised as on link on the adjacent infrastructure links to which it is attached. This is true for prefixes it is advertising and for other prefixes being advertised on the link. So I think that text covers the question you're asking, right? We've deprecated the prefix, but we're still advertising it. And that means that according to this text in section 5.4, we're required to advertise the prefix, to advertise a route to the prefix on the stub network. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I might have to think through it and from implementation perspective. Right now,
Uh-huh.
from the discussion, it seems like that addressability state machine will be on per prefix basis.
Just the advert, like it's
Yeah.
just the advertising, not the routeability.
Yeah.
Right. So, and on infrastructure, there's never like a dispute between which prefix we're advertising, right? Either we're advertising a ULE prefix or we're not advertising anything at all. Because if the infrastructure is providing IPv6, we don't need to. So the case where there's actually a dispute between which of the two prefixes we're advertising is on the stub network, where we might be advertising our own ULA on the stub network, and then suddenly we get a DHCP prefix delegation from infrastructure. And so we want to advertise the delegated prefix instead of the prefix that we'd previously been advertising. At that point, now we're advertising two prefixes on the stub network. We're advertising in principle, and actually this is a question that I think maybe is the thing that needs to be clarified. So let's go back to managing addressability on the stub network. So do we have a state machine for the stub network yet? I think we didn't do that yet.
No, we have, yeah, that's not been updated. Maybe that's why I was
Right.
confused. I was looking for some state machine around reachability.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think one quick solution, what you could do is that in deprecating section, just mention that for managing reachability, reachability state machine will kick in, which is described in section 5.4, some kind of forward reference so that section looks complete.
Mm-hmm.
Is that possible?
I don't see why not. So what you're proposing, this would actually probably be a new issue. Let me just close this one out because I think we finished with this edit. Here we're just reviewing. We're not proposing new changes.
Yes, I think so. But Esco's in the queue. He's raised his hand. Thanks, Esco, for following our process and doing that. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just was wondering. There was one question raised about whether the state machine is for the entire stub router or whether the state machine applies to individual prefixes. I think it was the first, but just
Right.
to repeat
So
that question.
yeah, so this is a really good question, right? Because but just to finish the first thought, I think that we concluded that this change, which is just changing reachable to, or sorry, usable to suitable, and you had a clarification that I think we're going to do on this one. This is done, right? We can say that this is okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to just approve it. And then we shouldn't merge it though, because Jonathan, assuming you're willing to make the change, Esco asked for a change to this.
Yeah, I'll make the change.
So,
Thanks.
all right. So let's go back to the document, if that's all right. By the way, I can't see both the queue and the document at the same time. So if somebody has their hands raised, sorry?
We'll look after that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. And
okay,
I just
so,
want to add 1 second. Sorry, just to, I'm going to mark down an action here as well for Kieran to open an issue for your concern. Suggest some text in there, Kieran, because I think we've concluded that's a separate issue at the moment, correct?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, Kieran, would you mind doing that? Because I think that makes a lot of sense, because you can do that sort of while we're moving on to the next thing, and then we can actually possibly go and do that issue, assuming we have time. So let's go back to pull requests. Generating a per stub router ULA site prefix. Okay, so, and then Esco had some good comments on this. Oh, actually, let's go back to the files changed view. That's easier. Okay, so here, Generating a ULA prefix to provide addressability. Generating a per stub router ULA site prefix. Oh, okay. Yeah, right. So the site prefix term, I guess, came up during the meeting last time. So some technologies can produce partition networks where it is notionally the same stub network, or what is okay, winds up looking like two discrete links. So yeah, I think this is a change that we proposed last time, right, Jonathan, in the last meeting?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So
While Ted's looking at
So
that,
the-
Esco, if you wanted, did you want to open up at something new, or did you just have something to build on what we're currently discussing?
Oh yeah, I raised my hand. Yeah, that was the previous question still. So is the state machine like for the entire stub router, which I think it is, or is it something that is per prefix, which I don't think it is, but I don't think
right. So
that yet.
yeah, so this is like the eternal problem of state machines and implementations, right? Which is like, which state do you represent as a state, and which state do you represent as just something that's hanging off of the state machine? Ideally, everything should be a state, but sometimes that produces multiplications. For example, if you have two different kinds of prefix you can publish, then you can have two states. One is the state where I'm publishing. I mean, you basically, the states you can have. So let's talk about the DHCP prefix state just as an example, because obviously that's the one we care about. So you could be in the state where you're publishing nothing because you haven't decided to publish yet. You could be in the state where you're publishing a ULA prefix and you're not publishing a DHCP prefix. You could be in the state where you've gotten a DHCP prefix, and so you need to deprecate the ULA prefix, but you haven't finished deprecating it yet. And in that case, that's a discrete state from the state where you're just publishing a DHCP prefix. And then there's another state which you could be in, which is, I was publishing a DHCP prefix, but it's not being renewed. So I'm going to start publishing a ULA prefix so that we have a prefix. And so now you're publishing two prefixes again, but in this case, it's the DHCP prefix being deprecated, not the ULA prefix. So you can do that, or you can have just a general state machine, which is like, I'm in the state where I'm not publishing anything. I'm in the state where I'm publishing a ULA. I'm in the state where I'm publishing the DHCP prefix. And that's it. And then separate from that, you can have states where you basically, you can have prefixes that you have published or not published. So I'm publishing the ULA prefix, I'm publishing the DHC prefix. Those can just be two different things that are sort of hanging off of the state machine, or you could think of it as managed by two different state machines that are per prefix. So you've got a per stub network state machine, and then you've got a per prefix state machine for the DHCP prefix and for the ULA prefix. And so in my implementation of this, just to, and we've got also abstract versus somebody actually implemented the code, right? So I actually have an implementation of this, and in my implementation, the set of state machines, let's see if I can find it. So the set of states for this guy is, I've got the startup state, the check for DHCP state, the not publishing state, the publishing DHCP state, and the publishing ULA state. So, so the startup state is just, we don't know what to do yet. The check for DHCP state is like the startup state, except that we have come to the conclusion that we may need to publish a prefix. And so we're now actually asking the DHCP server for a prefix, but we haven't gotten it yet. The not publishing state is, we started up, we saw a prefix already being advertised on the Stub network, and so we decided not to publish our own prefix, right? The publishing DHCP state is, we actually got an answer from the DHCP server. We're publishing it, publishing ULA state. Obviously, you know, we got an answer from the we didn't get an answer from the DHCP server, and so we're publishing a ULA prefix instead. Now, one thing to say about this is the only reason to publish a deprecated prefix is so that a newcomer on the wire can see it, right? Anybody who was present on the stub network, any host who was present on the stub network when we sent out an RA containing, let's say, the DHCP prefix, knows about that prefix and knows what its lifetime is. So the only reason to send out another RA is if we want to actually extend either the valid or the preferred lifetime or both of that prefix, which we'll never do, right? Either we're going to, well, actually, correction. If we're continuing to advertise the prefix, of course, we're going to extend its valid and preferred lifetimes. But if we're deprecating it, we're never going to extend either of those. And therefore, we don't need to send out a new RA because we want a newcomer to the network to see whatever is the preferred prefix, and we don't care whether it sees the deprecated prefix. So the deprecated prefix is we only care about that for devices that already know about it. So we have to provide routing for that prefix, but we do not need to continue advertising it. So from the perspective of the state machine that's managing the publication, which is to say what prefix we're sending in router advertisements, we don't actually need to do anything. We're not sending the deprecated prefix in a router advertisement ever. However, and this is the point that I think, you know, you and Kieran have both been hitting on, is that we do need to remember that that prefix exists because we still need routing to that prefix from the other network. Does that make sense? You guys still there?
Yeah, we are still here. Yeah. Yeah, let me think
Okay.
about that. So I'm just thinking there can be multiple state machines, of course, but
Yeah.
the one that's looking for a suitable prefix is just yeah, you could say there's one instance of that state machine formally, because you don't need two of them, huh? Because if you yeah, basically one process looking for a suitable prefix and publishing one if it's needed. So you don't need to have 10 of those processes and in one device. Just
right. So that's on the AIL.
yeah,
We were
on
just
the
talking about
AIL
the stub
side.
link.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
I think that's where we have to be very clear. I think ESCO is actually asking about the state machine on the AIL prefix.
Yep.
But on the AIL prefix, we don't ever. There's only ever one prefix that we might publish.
That was my
We don't have
comment
to remember
in
any
chat.
other prefixes. Very simple.
Yeah, but it's not even linked to a prefix, the state machine, I think, right? So it's just in general, there's one instance of it that's looking for a prefix, and if there's none, it will try to publish a prefix, and it can deprecate it and republish it, etc. But there's never going to be 2 or 3 or more instances of that state machine, I think.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. That's it. I think,
And right, and for the OMR prefix, sorry, for the stub network prefix, I think we don't really need to have a separate state machine. We just need to have, like, you know, here's the prefix that you know, basically there's a DHCP prefix maybe, and there's a ULA prefix definitely, and the DHCP prefix has a preferred and a valid lifetime, which we can represent as wall clock time, and the same with the ULA prefix. And so if we wind up deprecating the DHCP prefix, then all we have to do is just not update the wall clock time of its the end of its preferred. Basically, we set its preferred lifetime expiry to now when we deprecate it. So the valid lifetime is whatever the remaining time is on the lease, and then we just you know, when it comes time to generate an RA to send on the infrastructure network, we just look at the wall clock time And if the wall clock time for the valid lifetime of a prefix is in the past, then we don't advertise it. If it's in the future, we do advertise it. It's that simple. So there's no real, we don't have to have a special state machine tracking that. We can just look, we have some recollection or some knowledge of what the prefixes are that we may be advertising, and that's available to the thing that's advertising routes or that's doing router advertisements on the adjacent infrastructure link. Does that sound okay?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a little funky because you really could think of these as state machines, right? But it's so simple that there's no point in really tracking it as a state machine.
So then on pull request number 41, just to round it up, Ted and folks, the outcome of 41 then, after all the questions have been asked. I think we have, just for FYI, Ted, we have 2 suggestions, 2 actions. Kieran's suggestion action, Michael's suggestion action on Beacon, which didn't get discussed, but he's going to write it. Was there anything else on number 41?
I thought we were done with 41. So I think the answer is no. Yeah. Okay, so we had actually...
Does it need to be approved? Does it get approved then?
So, well, it's a little challenging because we're not approving it on behalf of the working group. I approved it.
No.
And I think
pull request, yes.
Yeah. Right. Oh, I see. Well, so I think Jonathan actually needs to update the pull request to include ESCO's suggestions, or else do a separate pull request to include ESCO's suggestions.
Yeah, I was planning to just update the PR, but I'm open.
That's great. Yeah. No, I think, as far as I'm concerned, that's approved with that caveat. So you know what to do.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So we were going over 522. Sorry, this is pull request number 40, which is generating a per stub router ULA site prefix. So, so first there's this change. We changed generating ULA prefix to provide addressability to generating a per stub router ULA site prefix. And that's because, well, let's not go into because yet, but so, and then this text changed, and so this is the introduction to the section, and it says, yeah, we need ULA prefixes. Wow. So this is actually a substantial change to the text. Oh, I see. Okay, so on stub networks that can partition one way of... It's funny, this text doesn't really seem like it applies. You were going to say, Kieran?
Yeah, so in this section, I was always getting confused. We are talking about allocating prefixes for the stub network, but then adjacent infrastructure network comes into picture again and again. So I have a very dumb question. All the prefixes for stub network will be allocated or advertised by the stub router, right? Not from the infrastructure.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, so which also means that certain aspects of state machine that we have described in 512 or whatever about the AIL, all of them will not apply for the stub network, especially the cases where prefixes are being announced from or advertised from the infrastructure. Is that right?
So a lot of what you said I got, but the very beginning I didn't. So I think I missed the antecedent that you're referring to.
Okay, I think in just to summarize, I think this section is confusing because there are some references to infrastructure networks or the machinery of how infrastructure networks provide prefixes to the stub router. And we can clean it up by removing all the text around infrastructure. And one of the thing was that in section, hang on just a second. In section 5.2, third paragraph, we say that router discovery will be done in the same mechanism as described in section 5.12. But in section 5.12, we also talk about advertisements from the infrastructure, and that does not apply here.
Okay, so the thing that you may be missing is that it's possible for a stub network to have two stub routers on it. And if that's the case, then we don't want both stub routers to advertise a prefix. We only want one prefix. But I think, the question that you're asking does indicate that there's a gap here, which is that we're not really talking about that point. So maybe could you add another issue? I know I've already got you advertising or adding one issue, but could you add another issue that just basically asks the question you just asked? Because I think,
Okay, yeah.
and particularly point out paragraph 3 of section 5.2, because I think that really helps us to be clear on what it is that we need to address.
Yes, and it is a bit more involved. I don't think we'll be able to complete the discussion right now. I'll open an issue on that.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right. So, yeah, one thing to say about these pull requests is that if we try to do new stuff in the pull request, it actually makes it a lot more complicated than if we do the new stuff separately, even if it's in the same text that the pull request is updating. So I would kind of encourage us to approach it that way rather than in other words, the comments on the pull request should be about the thing that the pull request is trying to address, not about other stuff relating to the text that the pull request is changing. So
I wonder if we need to, in order to speed ourselves along, I wonder if we need to limit ourselves session to pull request content. If you have other issues, please write them in a notepad or somewhere on your desk, and then we'll bring them up at the end of the pull requests. How does that sound?
Exactly. Yeah,
okay.
I think that makes sense. So the first issue that I have with this document, with this change, and I'm assuming, Jonathan, this is text that I typed in. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's text that I believe you typed in and copied from the that notes document that Darren had.
Right. Yeah. So the challenge here is that the subject of this is about generating a per stub router ULA site prefix, but this text isn't actually justifying why we're doing that or even talking about the fact that we're doing that. It just immediately goes into the discussion about partitions. So I don't know what happened, but so the original text here, which is being removed, is in order to be able to provide addressability either on the stub network or an adjacent infrastructure network, a stub network must allocate its own ULA prefix. That text I don't think should be removed. That doesn't mean that we didn't remove it when we did the edit, but I think that text needs to stay there.
Yeah, the name did change actually. So there's now a ULA site prefix.
Yeah.
And another thing was also introduced. I don't recall the name, but I think we had a second thing, site prefix, and there was the the network ID thing. Yeah, I think the problem was it's not properly defined what ULA site prefix is.
Right.
In the proposed change. So.
Yeah, so we had a little bit of back and forth about that, and I think, tell me if this works for you, Esco. I think it makes sense to add something into the glossary that basically just says, here's what a ULA site prefix is. Here's what, let's say, we can come up with the right term, but something like ULA subnet prefix. So in other words, a site prefix is what a router allocates. and that's just, you know, it generates a global ID. That's a 40-bit quantity. That's a random, a nice random number, and it uses that to construct a ULA/48 prefix, and then subnet prefixes are allocated out of that /48 prefix. So I think that sort of clarifies the issue that you were raising. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that does define it. Yeah.
Okay.
And there was another related question, I think, in my comment there, but maybe we'll get to that.
Well, okay, so let's go back to the top here. So the first thing is, I think so I think this text shouldn't have been deleted. This new text, yeah, this is weird. This text probably shouldn't have been deleted either.
I think that text is below. I think it's just an artifact of the diff.
Oh, okay. So that text feels introductory to me. Okay, yeah, here's the across reboots bit. Okay, so that's fine. All right, so I can delete this comment, assuming that that's possible. Okay, so, all right, so, yeah. I can't, I don't know what, well, actually, I can go look at what the original text was. So we're in 522. So here's 522. In order to be able to provide addressability, okay, so all right, so this new text about partitioning. I don't actually remember why we proposed to put this here, because we have a section on partitioning in the document already. And that section, yeah, it feels like this is an edit to section 7.1 or section 7. So I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at the transcript or at the recording of the meeting to figure out why we wound up moving this up. But I think that needs further thought because this isn't really making sense to me. I mean, it's yeah. Okay, I think this needs some more thought. What do you guys? I mean, I'm just monologuing here. So what do you guys feel about this?
I was just going back through the notes from the last IETF, and I see the change in the document that was edited in line. I see different text than what is shown in the. I don't know. So I see the text that's proposed is what was edited in the document online. However, I don't see exactly where in the minutes that was mentioned. I see a forward pointer being needed to be added, and then I see relaxed requirements on a single root ULA prefix generated by stub router, and there was some discussion around that, but not necessarily the text that's currently in that section from the meeting.
Yeah.
I think it might be
So
easier if you click on the three dots in the upper right and just say View File, and then go to line 491, and just view it as an entirety, because as part of that edit, it does, if you get to the second to last paragraph, it does say a stub router must therefore, so like the paragraphs before we're trying to justify why we're allocating a EULA site prefix.
Mhm. Yeah, I get you, and that makes sense. But looking at this in the sort of like, no longer in the heat of the discussion, it sort of feels like, so we've got 1, 2, 3 paragraphs talking about partitions, and then we talk about allocating the ULA site prefix, and so. And we, as I was saying earlier, we have a section that's specifically about partitioning events on the stub network. So I
Well,
guess
yeah,
what I'm
so
saying is, it's not that you did this edit wrong, John.
no.
Jonathan. It's that, yeah.
I'm trying to piece it back together myself. I think the
Yeah.
observation here was for the prefix on the AIL, there's no need for the stub routers to allocate their own prefix in certain situations, like thread,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I think so. That was the primary comment of what is this per stub router EULA prefix really for? And so maybe this. So there used to be a section here on just allocating stub router EULA prefixes, and maybe that whole section just moves to section 7.
Well, so the issue is, so remember that this is not a thread specific document, and so remember we had some discussions about, like, is there a way that so the fun thing with thread is that thread has a unique identifier per mesh, which happens to be, I think, 48 bits. And so we wound up, just as an expedient hack, which, makes a huge amount of sense, really, saying, if we need to advertise a prefix on the AIL, the prefix we're going to advertise is going to be constructed using that 48-bit unique identifier
64.
rather than, oh, is it 64?
64 bits unique identifier, yeah.
Oh, right, yeah. So we wind up using all but 8 bits of that in order to generate a /64, basically.
Okay,
So it
yeah.
starts with FD and then, right.
So
So,
then,
but we can't assume that for the stub network document, because in the stub network case, what do we use for that
okay,
sort of random?
I remember. So I think then the discussion was around, the text was saying that you allocate this AIL prefix out of that, but we wanted to change the text to allow for the thread use case.
Right. Yeah. So then I think this new text about partitioning is good. I like the new text. But I think maybe some of it belongs in the partitioning section of the document. And so, in other words, it might make more sense to say something like, in section 7, we discuss the possibility of partitioning. And for the partitioning case, we need to be able to allocate subnet ULA prefixes. And in addition, in sort of in the abstract, we may need a ULA prefix to use on the adjacent infrastructure link. And unless it's allocated in some other way, it would have to be allocated out of this site ULA prefix that's generated by the router. So it feels like, this section, basically the purpose of this section is to describe the generation and maintenance of the ULA, of the per stub router site ULA prefix. And it should say why that's needed. But the primary function of this is to describe it. So starting out by saying why it's needed and having 3 paragraphs of why it's needed, followed by the maintenance part feels like it's sort of confusing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think
Yeah.
this section is really just defining, yeah, like you said.
Yeah. Right. So I think
Yeah.
what happened is like I can't remember who, but somebody raised the question like, why are you even doing this? And that's why we added these 3 paragraphs. But I think this is like, and these were 3 good paragraphs which we should keep, but we just need to think about how to organize it better, because I don't think that the way we're doing it now is actually the right way. So I think we're all on the same page here. Jonathan, do you want to take charge of that change?
I can,
Or
yeah, I can take a look at that.
okay. All right. So
Yeah, just dropping in one more question. So I think we are also replacing the former /64 prefix now by a site prefix, which is shorter. What was it? /48, I think.
so
Quite
Esco,
good.
we actually, there isn't any such thing as a ULA, as a 64-bit ULA prefix, really. There you can derive a ULA prefix, a /64 from a ULA prefix, but
Yeah.
you know, in a technical sense, a ULA prefix is a /48.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah,
But,
but it's challenging because
but
they're
okay,
go ahead.
but you're suggesting kind of that, and so I'm not sure what the old text tried to say, but this is suggesting that okay, you generate and you keep a site prefix, and
Yeah, the old
that's really a
text I
prefix.
think said that. I can show you the old text.
Well, it didn't have that terminology of site.
You're right, it didn't. Yeah, so generating a ULA prefix in order to be able to provide addressability on the stub or on an adjacent infrastructure must allocate its own ULA prefix. So its own ULA prefix was intended to refer to that /48. So
Yeah.
and the problem that we had, and I think what came up in the meeting was that this whole thing that we just like dug into just now, like what does it mean to say a ULA prefix? And the way I was using the term is a ULA prefix is always a /48, but the /64 that you derive out of the /48 is also essentially a ULA prefix. So
Yeah.
so it's actually I think the problem we had was that we needed a separate term for the 2 different types of prefix. And so
Right.
I think what we have proposed here in your comment, remember we had this discussion, so you had said this, which all made sense. And then I suggested that we just need to add this to the glossary and use these terms so that we're not confusing ourselves.
Yeah, that's right. So let me just rephrase that. So it generates a single ULA site prefix. So that's a /48. And from that, it derives, let's say, a /64 to use on the stub network, and
or wherever.
That doesn't it also allocate then a network ID to use for the /64, or does it pick a new network ID every time?
You mean an IID?
Global ID?
No, not the IID. So it's the ULA consists of the global ID. So this is the part that's in the /48, and it also consists of a subnet ID, which is the remaining 16 bits. So I'm just wondering about that. So did we mean that only the global ID part is fixed and not the network ID part, or do we want both parts to be fixed so that you always get the same /64 in the end on the stub network?
So the problem with that, I mean, yeah, it actually makes sense to do that. So basically, for any given router, the stub router owns its site ULA prefix using the new terminology. So no other router in principle, I mean, of course, random number collisions can happen, but it's a large number, so it probably won't. So this stub router is going to be advertising and from the perspective of the stub router, even if there's a partition, the stub network that this particular stub router is connected to is always going to be the same stub network, right? There might be partitions, but this stub network is always, if it's connected to a stub network, whatever stub network that is a valid stub network for it to advertise a prefix. And there is no other stub network on which that prefix could be advertised because this stub router is not connected to that other stub network. So that means that we could always use the same prefix. And so I guess your question is, should we define which subnet ID to use for the stub network and which subnet ID to use for the adjacent infrastructure link if we're providing this prefix on the adjacent infrastructure link? And by the way, we also use this ULA, the site local ULA for the prefix for the router to generate the NAT64 prefix. Right, so that's another ULA prefix that's subdivided out of this /48. So in fact, in my implementation, and it wouldn't surprise me if this is also true of the open thread implementation, we just use a constant. We don't ever, there isn't a random choice as to which subnet ID we use for the adjacent infrastructure link or for the stub network.
Okay.
However, because it's particular to a particular to the router, to the stub router, it kind of doesn't matter whether we specified this or not. I mean, we could, but for example, suppose like Apple uses 0 as the subnet ID for the stub link, and OpenThread uses 1 for the subnet ID of the stub link. It's not going to make any difference. There's no interoperability issue here. So
is there an issue where we might be closing some future extension by either over-specifying it or under-specifying it here?
Right. That's a good question. And so I have to say,
the /48 has to have a randomized portion to it, so that one we can't.
That's the 40 bits, yeah. That's the global ID, but we're talking about the network ID, which is the network potentially ID, not random.
Yeah, there's nothing in the ULA specification that says that we cannot specify something explicit. Right. But okay, go ahead. Keep going on Michael's question. Sorry.
Yeah. So Michael, I think the only issue that we'd run into, so I'm just thinking like, if I think about what extensions could be needed in the future, actually, now that I think about it, so suppose you've got a stub router that has more than one stub network. It's totally possible, right? There's no reason to exclude that possibility even now. Like we're not even talking about the future, even now. So what we want is to ensure, and probably this is the text we should use, is that the ULA subnet prefix that is allocated for a particular interface on the stub router, or for a particular link to which the stub router is connected, there should always be a different network ID for each such link. It doesn't matter what the network ID is, it just should always be different. So if the stub router, for example, has 2 AIL links and it needs to allocate subnet prefixes for those 2 AIL links, it should use different subnet numbers, right? So link 1 should be, let's say, 0, and link 2 should be 1. We don't need to specify 0 and 1. We just need to specify different. And I think that avoids, sort of closing out the possibility of future extensions. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. You may want to say stable as well.
Well, so that's a good question, right? Does it need to be stable?
You advertise a prefix, right? If you reboot, you're still there for a while until the lifetime expired. I mean, food for
There
thought, right?
was
I don't have a
text that
definitive
said
answer.
that it should. There is text in there that says it should be maintained over reboots.
That's the ULA prefix. But no, I think
ULA,
Eric's
yes.
point is good. Yeah, so we may need to specify this. Now, at this point, I have to say I'm completely failing to capture this. Has somebody captured this in the notes?
You have the recording, right? If you want.
I think that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we will.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Great. The recording's plenty. I can pump the recording through I use otter.ai to parse my recordings, so I could pump it through that if necessary. But anyway, so the point is, we do need to specify, and I think your point is right, Eric, that if possible, I don't think we should make it a must, but we should make it a should, that the mechanism whereby the subnet number is chosen should produce the same subnet for the same link, if that's possible.
Yeah, the should uppercase would be good. I mean,
Yep.
obviously the IF interface number, right? Spring to mind.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, exactly. If it's so I mean, this is sort of the classic challenge, right? You know, the interface ID on a Unix machine is pretty stable. But like if it's a removable USB interface, then it might not be. So, but if that's the case, then, you know, normally a reboot doesn't actually change the arrangement of the hardware in the system, and so in principle, the interface ID shouldn't change.
I guess for me, that starts to open questions on how you define what the same link is, right? Like a Wi-Fi interface that attaches to different APs, is that or different SSIDs, are those different links?
Yeah, I think they are.
Yeah, so I guess interface ID is not sufficient in those scenarios, right?
Yeah, that's true. But I don't think we would want to specify interface ID. I think we just want to write it in such a way that maybe, you know, for Ethernet, the interface ID might be enough, or for, you know, or it might not be, because, like, you know,
Yeah,
suppose you're connecting. I mean, I think, you know, the sorts of
same link.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we also have text that says if you're connecting to a different infrastructure, that you might want to actually use a different ULA, but you should use the same ULA for a particular infrastructure over time, right? We actually already say that.
Great.
So, or maybe we only already say that in the new text that you've been editing. Yeah, right. It's here. So anyway, so I think that covers this edit. I think we don't actually have the ability to say, yes, we're done with this, but hopefully we've captured the action items that we needed to capture, and, you know, we have the recording, so we can make sure that we do what we said we were going to do in this discussion based on the recording. So I think we can move on to the next pull request. Oh, what a coincidence. Okay. Okay. So I will just say as an implementer that we had this text in, and the reason for doing this was so that in the case that the adjacent infrastructure link prefix changed, we wanted to make sure that we would still know that it was potentially present on that interface. And this is actually not the best way to solve that problem. The best way to solve that problem is to just always configure whatever ULA interface, whatever ULA address we're going to use on the adjacent infrastructure link. Just always configure that on the interface. We don't have to advertise it in a router advertisement. We just configure it on the interface. So if there's a host on the adjacent infrastructure link that's still using that prefix, which perhaps we're no longer advertising, and it sends a message to the thread network, then when the device on the thread network responds to that IP address, we're going to know that that IP address is on link because it's configured as on link on our host. That's slightly complicated by the fact that there may be more than one stub router, and any of those stub routers could in principle use its prefix and advertise its prefix on the adjacent infrastructure link. And if it does, then the other stub routers aren't going to know that, and so they won't know that that prefix is on link. So the reason for doing this advertisement is to avoid that situation. But this is kind of a crappy way to solve that problem, because now we might be advertising like however many deprecated prefixes on the adjacent infrastructure link. Do we really want to do that? I don't know. So the other way to do this would,
I was just going to say that we ran into this as well in practice. So
yeah. The other way to do that would be to say that any given stub router should always advertise a route to its to its adjacent infrastructure link prefix. The problem with that is that could be a lot of routes. So we probably don't want to do that.
So either way, you have to remember the previous routes in your flash. Because you have to configure it when you reboot, right? On your interface.
Well, so there's two different kinds of prefixes we might want to remember. There's our ULA prefix.
Yes.
So our ULA, our site ULA prefix. There's the subnet ULA prefix that we generated for the adjacent infrastructure link. And then there's all of the other subnet prefixes that could have been advertised on the adjacent infrastructure link. So I think this is a problem because, we've got these devices that potentially might remember these devices that are on the, so I mean, yeah, this is a really hard problem. Like this is one of the ugly problems of the stub router space. If a stub router reboots, then there's a possibility that there will be reachability loss. And so this is trying to address the reachability loss, but the way it's trying to address the reachability loss is like not great.
But you've strayed away from the first question, right? The argument for why this is hard to implement is because I have to do writes to flash.
Right. Well,
okay.
No, I mean, there's two problems here. The argument that we say here is because we have to do writes to flash, but that's not the only problem. But you're right, that is one of the problems.
Right.
But so here's the thing. So the ULA prefix, let's just I'm going to propose something here, okay? Because it's great to have these discussions because every time we have them, things become a little clearer, I think. So here's the thing. We have we just said that we're going to try to make it deterministic what subnet number is chosen for any given interface. So that means that we can pretty much, assuming that that's the case, which I think is a reasonable assumption, then the prefix that would be used on the AIL does not have to be written into Flash because we do have to remember the /48. And also we said elsewhere that we're going to try and notice if we're on a different infrastructure. So if we're on a different infrastructure, then we're going to advertise we're going to use a different /48. So we'll have a /48 per infrastructure that we might connect to, right?
Right. So
So-
what you're arguing is that we've done one write to Flash a while ago, and
Yes.
that's okay. We don't have to do it on every RA, and that's
Right.
good. Okay.
Yep.
So that's an improvement.
Yep.
But fundamentally, we have to remember that. And once you've written down that we have to remember that, then the decision as to what to do on the restart is kind of more open, because you no longer have
Exactly.
constrained yourself to something. You're simply saying, don't have an architecture that requires us to write on every RA sent. That's a bad
Correct.
policy.
Yeah, we do
Right.
not want that. Okay.
Right.
So,
But configuring that address on the interface as a non-primary address, okay, does not seem very arduous to me. It seems like it can be expired out also, based upon, twice the preferred lifetime or something, or whatever it is we've put in there, plus a bit or something, and that should be fine.
Right. So there's an additional thing here, which so there's two things that occurred to me because of this discussion. One is we don't actually have to advertise this prefix as available for autonomous configuration, right? We could just advertise it as a prefix that's on link
That's
with
right.
the A-bit
Yeah.
clear, right?
Yeah.
So now that tells all the other routers that are on the link, this prefix is on the link. Well, that's to say all the other stub routers, because regular routers don't listen to these things. But all the stub routers now know that this prefix is on link. So then they're not going to drop the packet, and it's going to get forwarded on link, which is great. That solves our on link problem, I think.
So that also, if I'm not mistaken, solves the problem where I had two stub routers with separate sorry, the AIL is the infrastructure network, and what's the one with all the thread devices?
Stub.
That's just the stub network. Okay, thought we had another. So I have two stub networks. They're not connected. They have separate prefixes, which is appropriate, right? And that I had communication from stub network A to the old address on stub network B. Okay, and that did we renumber the other stub network when it rebooted?
So that's an excellent question, Michael, which I had not considered. All right. So the challenge is now we need to advertise not only the on-link prefixes, but also a route to prefixes that we might previously have advertised on the stub network.
Right.
And we were sort of doing that before with the DHCP prefix and the deprecated prefix. An interesting point about this is that we definitely don't have to advertise these forever. We only have to advertise them for the first n minutes after reboot, where n is our standard prefix lifetime.
Yep.
So this isn't too bad. But yeah, so your point is we need both the PIO and the RIO, not just the PIO. And I think that's right, and I think we can do that.
And we can write it once, and when we allocated it, and that's good. And then every time we might even wind up advertising it every time we rebooted for a few minutes. If we rebooted a lot of times, because we're not really sure how many minutes since the last reboot, right?
Right.
Your workmen in your house, with their power tools causing your routers to reboot all the time. And so that's okay. But then eventually we figure out that we've been stable for long enough. It's been at least that much time. We've deprecated the addresses. We could remove it from the flash at that point when we have another reason to write to it, I guess. You're saying that during that period of time, if we had stub network devices that were communicating with each other over the infrastructure network through the two routers, that they would be okay because they're still using addresses that were valid within the lifetime, and so that's all right.
So you've gone a slightly different direction than I was going.
Okay.
You're right about the point you just made, but the So I'm proposing that we never rewrite the flash, except when we generate a site ULA infrastructure identifier pair. Okay. So remember, we talked about having different ULA per infrastructure. So if we're moving from site to site, like say it's a a
That's
phone
a
of some
given.
sort,
That's a
right?
given. Let's ignore that
Right.
for the moment.
Well,
So
no, but
yeah.
no, but this so what I'm saying
Yeah.
is so we now have potentially writing to flash. We might either have just one prefix if we're not doing that, or we might have n prefixes where n is the number of infrastructures that we've seen and
Yes.
generate a ULA on.
Yes.
Okay, but in either case, we only ever write to flash the first time we see a new infrastructure.
And we don't have to keep any bookkeeping. And so let's say
No
that you
bookkeeping.
reboot again for some reason, again, power tools,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And the other router with its other prefix is off or hasn't finished rebooted. At that point, this router would then see that it has already generated a ULA, see that there's no suitable ULA on the infrastructure link, and would start advertising that same ULA that it had before, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't need to update the flash at all, I don't think.
Nope.
Maybe there's a timer. I don't think so.
No,
I think you can design it so that you never have to. You're never decrementing numbers in flash,
Yeah.
so that's okay.
Right.
So okay, so that seems right, and it doesn't seem like a hardship, even if you had, you have at most one of those for that infrastructure that you might have to configure as an alias on that network, right?
Yeah. So the thing that we're trying to avoid in the thread case, I'll just talk about this because I think it's relevant here, even though we're not trying to be thread specific. I think it sort of relates, right? In the thread case, the number of prefixes that we might want to advertise, or the number of routes that we might want to advertise on the thread network, is constrained. But because the thread network is not a through network, there's no routing happening through the thread network. We don't need to advertise any routes to make this work on the thread network. We only need to advertise them on infrastructure, and we're assuming infrastructure is not constrained. So it's perfectly fine to advertise 15 routes on infrastructure if that's what happens, right? But the only time that would happen is basically if all of your stub routers were rebooted at the same time, which I suppose would happen after a power cycle, right? So basically, our goal here is to just make sure that routing continues to work between stub networks if there are multiple stub networks, A, and B, that routing continues to work between devices that are using prefixes that are no longer being advertised on infrastructure and stub devices. And to do that, all we have to do is we configure whatever our AIL prefix is, we configure that on our AIL link, and whatever our stub network prefix or prefixes are, we advertise routes to those on infrastructure for the first n minutes after startup. And then after that time period has elapsed, we stop doing it. And since we're sending those, we're not sending any additional RAs. The only thing that's happening is that the routing table on the devices that are listening to RAs on infrastructure gets a little bigger during this period.
Sounds right.
If I tie it down to state machine again, when the stub router reboots, it will go into unknown state, and it will wait for an array from infrastructure to see if it can allocate any prefix or not. And only after that, it will go through this whole logic of stub router restart, where it is going to read from the flash and advertise ULA prefix. Am I right?
Essentially, yeah. One
Is
slight
there something
caveat.
you can add in the state machine that the behavior for router restart is also stub router restart is considered? Or
So
like
what
in
I
the
would
main.
suggest, so remember we talked about with advertising routes to networks on to thread prefixes before. This mechanism actually handles that just fine. What we do, remember, we have two slots for thread, right? One is the ULA prefix that we're advertising on thread, and the other is the DHC prefix that we're advertising on thread. And each of those has a wall clock expiry for the preferred and the valid lifetimes. In other words, the wall clock time is not just 10 seconds; it's 12 o'clock p.m. Right? So at 12 o'clock p.m., this prefix expires. So whenever we generate an RA, we generate the valid and preferred lifetimes based on the wall clock expiration time of the prefix. If the prefix is actually being advertised somewhere, that's going to be updated regularly. If the prefix is not being advertised, then it's static. And so in other words, actually, I suppose the way to do it is to mark it as to whether it's deprecated. And if it's deprecated, then we just subtract the wall clock time. And if it's less than 0, then we don't advertise it. So now on startup, we initialize the wall clock time of the ULA prefix advertised on the stub network to whatever, 30 minutes in the future, or we could actually subtract the amount of time we know it takes to reboot the device. And we initialize that on startup. We don't initialize that at the end of the sort of the startup state. We advertise we update it at the beginning of the startup state. So we're using up the potential elapsed time starting from the time that the router rebooted, as opposed to starting from like the end of the startup state. So once we get to let's say it's the 30 minutes is how long we're advertising the prefix for. 30 minutes after the time that the latest time that the router could have rebooted, 30 minutes after that, we stop advertising that prefix as being on link. And we stop advertising routes to the stub prefix. So I don't think we need an extra state machine for this. I think the stuff we're already talking about doing, I think addresses this fine. We just need to specify it.
Yeah, exactly. I did not mean to say that we need extra state machine. It is just that the router restart is also considered as part of state unknown.
Right.
I mean, like just writing one sentence that we will read from the flash prefixes and advertise them, even that will be useful, so that order of events for a developer when they are implementing it, they know what to do.
Yep. Okay, so wow, that was a long digression from this maintenance across stub router restarts thing, but I think we now understand what to do here. So I think it's fine to take this change as it is and then do a new change based on the discussion we just had. Does that sound all right?
Yes.
Esco?
Yeah, if you prefer that, that's okay. I wasn't really understanding the text that was proposed by this PR, so.
Okay, so
I don't know what was meant by it.
So let me look at your comment here. So it says thread stub routers use 40 bits of the ULA prefix. It should say something like the global ID of.
This might be the confusion about site prefix versus the longer prefix.
Yeah, no, your clarification here is good. So I don't know, Jonathan, do you want to capture that? Do you see what he's saying?
Still trying to parse it, but I can work with Esco offline on that.
All right. Yeah, I mean, part of the issue here is that actually the way that we currently do this in thread is that we take the I think either the most or the least significant.
Okay. Yeah, we do something different in thread than what's written here. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it might be worth actually making this text describe correctly what we do in thread as opposed to describing incorrectly what we do in thread.
Yep. No, I can.
And that might address Esco's concerns.
I think one important aspect is that it only talks about the 40 bits, and that
exactly.
these need to be the same. And if you don't have the other 16 bits picked the same, then you still don't get where you want to be. So you might still get a different prefix every time.
Yep.
And I think the comment that was for the text change above this one was the part where I didn't really understand. So it talks
Oh,
about
okay.
saving all prefixes to Flash, and also the maximum valid lifetime that was advertised.
Right.
Saving that to
Yes.
Flash. That's
Right.
unclear to
So
me.
that was the text
Always-
that the long discussion that Michael and I just had basically said we don't need to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So so I think we're going to do an update to this. So basically we could either just, I mean, so that change,
yeah, we can also first do the
I
change.
think at this point, so this text is actually part of a note to the working group. It's not actually intended to be part of the document.
Yeah. That's right.
So I think we should just do the update that we just talked about and not worry too much about this one, because I think, all right.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
so Jonathan, I'm going to mark this one as approved based on the discussion we just had. Is that all right?
That's fine. And then I'll address Esco's last comment and then just merge this, and you'll do the change.
Yeah.
Separately for the Michael and you. Yep.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, so there's that. So that's all of the pull requests. And then we still have issues.
All right, so one of the things we wanted to cover today was, do we need to meet again before Brisbane? And perhaps the answer is yes.
Well, so there's a slight challenge there in that, let's see. Okay, cutoff date for.
So while you're searching that on this, typically we try to avoid having an interim meetings the week before the IETF week. So it's only left us the next week, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Which is okay, of course. And normally you should have also a warning. So we can try, right? So we have about 10 people here in the call. So if you can find something next week, it's fine.
Yeah. So the challenge is, so we have to give 2 weeks notice for an interim, right?
That's correct. But this one, if it's an urgent need, we can override. I can override, right? So.
Okay. Well, so let me just look at the calendar here. So today's the 20th. Our cutoff is the 4th. That is indeed less than 2 weeks. So yeah, I think maybe we should just, if you're okay with it, Eric, maybe propose that we do another meeting, same time next week or something like that, if that works for everybody.
It works. If you have any problem, I will try to override.
Okay.
And we are only 10 people, right, in the call. So if nobody strongly objects, I would say tonight, but it's tonight for me, but today for you, then let's go for it.
Okay.
Anybody object to have a meeting in basically 1 week from now?
No, it works.
Thank you,
Good
Karen.
with me.
Let's go, and Michael.
Jonathan, Michael.
Yeah, that's okay.
That should work.
Okay, so Kieran and Darren, please submit a request, and if there is something, I will contact the Secretariat to override the 2 weeks prior warning.
Okay, that was a fast one. Do we want to try to pick off one of the issues that requires text?
We have 10 minutes left. I am willing to attempt that if you want. I'm a little skeptical.
Another option,
and I have also some consideration for Ted's brain. He must be toasted right now, so
I'm pretty
after
toasted.
agreeing for 2 hours. So let's shut the meeting now. I mean, again, I'm just as an individual person, right?
Yep. Yeah, no, I would be okay with that. I think the likelihood of us making further progress is slim.
The other thing that we could do is we have 10 people on the call. We spent 2 hours doing this. We're going to spend another couple hours next week. Can we ask people to take those issues and suggest some texts, submit a PR, contribute that way, and perhaps we can make some forward progress before the next call.
I think that would be great. I think we should be careful that we don't have multiple people doing the same issue, though.
Yeah. I mean, if we do have multiple people doing the same issue, we get multiple views and they can,
I guess,
they can hash it out. It makes for fun fights, but.
Okay.
Or you can assign yourself to an issue if you are the first.
Oh, yeah, I think that would be better, actually.
Excellent.
That's also fine.
Okay, let's do it that way. And, you know, if somebody assigns themselves to an issue and their solution is terrible, then, you know, obviously we'll still have a fight, but that's okay. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
And thanks for setting this up, Darren and Kieran.
Okay, so we have 2 resolutions at the end of this. We're going to meet next week. Folks on the call, you've participated, you're primed now.
Yep.
Yeah, it'd be awesome if we could have some text proposed for next week. It'll make things move faster.
Great. Okay, and the recording, can you let us know? I don't know if there's an automatic thing or not about the recording, but obviously the recording is going to be useful in this case.
Yeah, we will make sure it gets to the list, and the notes have been taken as well.
Great. Okay.
All right, see you next week. Same time, isn't it? Or do you want it earlier?
I think the European folks might like it earlier. I don't object to that. I don't think I have any kind of
would be
conflict.
nice. I mean, for me, it's 9 p.m., right? So,
yeah.
And if I
guess
as well,
the question is, like, Jonathan and Apton, are you okay with it being? I mean, for them, it's 10 a.m. So certainly an hour earlier is still civilized time.
For me, it works. Yeah. Sorry, which day was this? It depends on the other.
Can we make it 1 or 2
like,
hours earlier?
Yeah, maybe 8 a.m. your time next Tuesday.
Works for me. Yeah, I have a. Okay, so I have a bunch of CSA board meetings on that day, but I can try and get our alternate board member to attend. So I'm not sure yet.
So basically there isn't a good time that day, other than you doing that.
Yeah. No, well, not until 11 a.m. my time. So that's even later than.
Which would really suck for the Europeans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever.
I guess. So. Yeah, I guess, Jonathan, it's kind of up to you whether you want to do that or not. If you're okay with that, then that works for me. But, you know, otherwise we could. Is there a day that's better?
I mean, at this point of time, let's do it same day, same time next week. I will survive. Right.
Well, it's not going to make any difference to Jonathan. He just has he has a conflict at this time also. So if earlier is better for you and Jonathan's willing to like skip out on those 2 hours of his CSA meetings, then.
Well, I can propose. I could try 6 a.m. my time on Tuesday.
Wow.
If we're willing to go.
I'm okay with that, but what about you, Apton? And also, I guess Kieran's on California time, right?
I can make it work. That's okay for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make it work too.
Okay. You guys are very brave.
So 6 a.m. is very, very brave indeed.
Yes. Is 6 a.m. okay for you, Eric?
6 a.m. for your Californian time is perfect, right? I got also called at 6 a.m. Basically, it's 9 p.m. US. So I got some meeting at that point of time as well.
So look at the
Whatever.
brighter side. I won't ask too many questions. I'll be too sleepy.
So are we resolving then for 4 hours earlier than today's meeting?
I think so.
Do we
Works
have
for me.
objections? Please speak up.
Oh, and by the way, I just checked my own agenda. I've got a board meeting, whether it's 6 a.m., 7 a.m., or 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Pacific. So I won't be in the call. Sorry.
Okay. We forgive you. Okay. It sounds like we're settled.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
guys. We will send some minutes from today's discussion on the mailing list and the link to recording, and see you next week.
Okay.
Okay. Enjoy the meeting and thanks for coming.
Yep.
Bye
Ciao.
bye.
Right.
Bye, everyone.